We are back at the 1980s for this month's Film Review Open Challenge, specifically 1987 for today's review of The Lost Boys, a film I haven't seen and called hokey looking during my livestream reaction. Before I watch, I know that this is about vampires and has nothing to do with Peter Pan, a totally original observation I came up with years ago when the film was first picked. Now, it's well established that I don't like vampires. The only interesting vampire film I've seen is Daybreakers, which has a very cool concept. But you know what, if everyone else likes this film, and there are a lot who like The Lost Boys, then maybe this one will convince me that vampires are cool. Here's my review of The Lost Boys. The Emerson family, Mother Lucy and two boys Michael and Sam, moved from Phoenix to Santa Carla to live with Lucy's father after finalizing a divorce. The boys don't find much fun at the house with their eccentric grandpa, but that night at the boardwalk, Michael becomes infatuated with a woman, and Sam finds a comic book store where two young kids running the place, Edgar and Alan, challenge Sam's knowledge. Lucy meanwhile gets herself a job in Max's video store. There's a biker gang that have been causing trouble for a long time, and the next night, when trying to take the woman named Star to get some food, the biker gang led by David challenge Michael to keep up on his motorcycle. After nearly flying off of a cliff, David invites Michael back to their hideout, to which he's offered Chinese rice, which look like maggots, noodles, which look like worms, and a bottle of red liquid, which he's told is blood, but he doesn't believe what he's told. Later that night, he and his new friends end the night by hanging from a high railway bridge and plummeting into the fog. Michael wakes up in his bed the next afternoon. Meanwhile, Sam has obtained a couple of comic books from Edgar and Alan about vampires and heavily implied that vampires live amongst them. The next night, Michael is babysitting Sam while Grandpa is at the neighbours and Lucy is on a date with Max. Michael starts to get the urge to attack Sam whilst he's in the bath, but Sam's dog Nanook, sensing danger, attacks Michael first, biting his hand. Sam, when checking up on Michael, sees that his reflection is now semi-transparent, immediately jumping to the conclusion that Michael is a vampire. Michael, flying out the window, convinces Sam not to tell Lucy whilst he tries to sort it, and heads back to the lair where he finds Star and sleeps with her. Edgar and Alan are keen for Sam to kill Michael, but Sam is of course reluctant, instead trying to work out who the head vampire is so they can kill him and revert Michael back to normal. They suspect Max, but at a family dinner he seems to eat garlic, not glow in the dark, and have a reflection, and so is ruled out. That night, Michael is taken to a beach party by David and the rest of the vampires to watch them feast on innocence, but Michael resists, instead teaming up with Sam, Edgar and Alan to kill the group the next day. They successfully remove Star and the child vampire Laddie before killing one of the vampires, Marco, and narrowly escaping David. The vampires attack the house that night in revenge, but the humans and half-vampires are ready and quickly take out all three remaining vampires, though this doesn't revert Michael back to normal, so the head vampire is still at large. Lucy, returning with Max from their date, sees the wrecked house and asks questions before Max reveals that he was the head vampire all along. He wanted to be with Lucy and so planned to convert Michael and Sam to convince her to join too. Max fends off his attackers, and just as Lucy looks to give herself up, Grandpa crashes through the log wall, killing Max with a log through his heart. The day is saved, Michael, Laddie and Star become human again, as Grandpa comments how much he hates vampires in Santa Carla. I'll be honest, this film didn't click with me. I didn't really get into it. I have some good points, some bad points and some really nitpicky stuff, but overall I can't say this grabbed me that much. Let's start with the positives though. The story is simple to follow. It explains just enough about vampires in this world to make sense, and is mostly acted well. Mostly. I love Keifer Sutherland in most things he's in, and here as David as the lead vampire, aside from Max, he's antagonistic, charming, and surprisingly, has the smallest amount of dialogue of any of the main cast. It's a shame we don't learn anything about his character or anything about the other vampires, Dwayne, Paul and Marco. Those three in particular have no character at all aside from just being vampires. This is contrasted with the Frog brothers Edgar and Alan, an obvious nod to Edgar Allan Poe, who are great, my favourite characters, especially Edgar. Corey Feldman plays Edgar and apparently was given the task to watch a load of 1980s action movies starring Sylvester Stallone and Chuck Norris, and you can certainly see that influence, complete with the red headband like Rambo. I want to briefly mention Jason Patric, who plays Michael, and he's fine, I guess. Occasionally though, he reminds me a lot of Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker. I would have liked to have seen more of Michael before the conversion, as we're told that his character is really different and more standoffish, but we don't really see it that much. Yeah, he's a dick to Sam and Lucy, but some character moments before then would have really sold the change in his attitude. The only person I felt didn't really hit the mark though was Diane Wiest as Lucy. She's a multi-time Oscar-winning actress, but I don't know if it's the material or her not just being into it. I don't think she played the mother character very well. As far as the story is concerned, I mentioned that it's simple to follow, but occasionally it feels like it's not thought out enough. I already mentioned the lack of character depth for the supporting cast, but then I look at the final reveal as Max the head vampire when he's the only person in the film ruled out, using the established rules of what makes a vampire. So the justification is that vampire tests don't work on him because you become powerless if you invite a vampire into your home, which he is, but I don't think that should apply to the tests, just any defences against vampire abilities. I'm all for twist endings, but imagine a murder mystery where there are only two suspects, and one is ruled out due to overwhelming evidence, and then it's revealed that it was them all along. The twist to me doesn't work for this reason. There's not enough depth for it to work narratively. I would have liked to seen other people ruled out perhaps. Also a really minor nitpick, but I reckon the whole semi-transparency rule was put there because they couldn't remove the reflection of Michael flying outside Sam's window. I do like the subtle nuances of the film though. It gets a lot of the little things right, and it's very difficult to be subtle and get the message across without being heavy-handed. The missing posters throughout the film suggest that the vampires have been around and feeding for a while. Laddie's photo appears on the milk carton as a missing person, or lost boy if you like, and there are enough Easter eggs around the film to distract on multiple viewings. Simple one like Rob Reiner's poster being a reference to the director's previous films, to the more complicated one in Jim Morrison's face in The Vampire's Lair. Jim Morrison, lead singer of The Doors, did the original version of People Are Strange, one of the many theme songs of the film, but the version used in the film is by Echo and the Bunnymen, whose poster also appears on the film. This segues perfectly into the soundtrack, which is absolutely the strongest aspect of this film. 80s rock ballads? Yeah. But they also fit in thematically too. I'm listening to the soundtrack as I write this script, and I almost never do that. That soundtrack is used really well, especially in the opening credits, where it's established that the family moving, the unusual people in Santa Clara, along with the abundance of missing persons posters. I guess then it's time to talk about Joel Schumacher, who directed the film. There's a lot to like, honestly. The less is more mentality is well done here, especially when people are taken or attacked from the sky. We barely see anyone fly in the film, but we know that they can, thanks to those amazing camera angles. A minor nitpick though is the overuse of fading transitions in the sex scene between Michael and Star. It's off-putting, and frankly that short scene doesn't fit in aesthetically to everything else. Joel Schumacher famously directed the two bad Batman movies, Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. I'm sure I'll get to reviewing those films one day, but until this film, this kind of thing was my only exposure to Schumacher's work.
7 million. Never leave the cave without it.
Let's talk about the legacy of The Lost Boys. Most successful films, and The Lost Boys was very successful, get a sequel or two. Joel Schumacher tried to get a sequel going for about 20 years unsuccessfully, but then in 2008 a straight-to-DVD movie was released called Lost Boys: The Tribe, starring Keifer Sutherland's brother Angus, and Corey Feldman reprising his role as Edgar. This was then followed up in 2010 with Lost Boys: The Thirst, which reunited Feldman with Jameson Newlander as Alan Frog. Both have very, very negative review scores, and no, I haven't seen them, nor do I intend to. The Lost Boys, though, had a much bigger impact on popular culture. Some credit it for making vampires young and sexy. Well, maybe that's where I'm going wrong. It inspired Joss Whedon when creating Buffy the Vampire Slayer, especially the character of Spike, who is directly inspired by David. The thing is, I still don't like vampires as a concept, and the Lost Boys may be pretty good, but it hasn't converted me to the idea. The only thing it did change was one opinion I had on Twilight, because it establishes that vampires do sparkle in the dark. Marco explodes into glitter, and so I can no longer criticise the fact that Edward Cullen sparkles now. I think. If you like vampires in the 1980s, then please go see The Lost Boys. It's not that long and it has its moments, but for me, vampires still suck. Coming up next for the Film Review Open Challenge is Dirty Dancing. For now though, thank you very much for watching.